see my journals or planners as almost like an extension of myself, which means that when life changes or I change or whatever else changes, typically speaking, my planner has to change with me. Even if you don't think about it kind of in the way of an extension of yourself, maybe as a mirror of yourself, depending on how you like to use your planner or journal, that still holds, you know? If your reflection changes, then the thing that's doing the reflecting is going to change too. Now, in terms of what we've got on screen here, we have my very first journal, which was, my first bullet journal, I suppose. Not my first planner ever, because I did have a school diary before this and, whatever else. And then my most recent one. And we're not just going to look at these two, because yes, there are definitely differences between the two of them, but also a couple of other ones, because there are a variety of ways that our planning style can change, a variety of ways that our planner or journal will change as a result of that. So we're just going to have a conversation about those and have a look through some examples. As we go through, I would love to hear your examples of any of the things that we're talking about, and also any of the other ways that you think that your planners have changed. Very curious to hear about them, because while I can go through and identify the ways that mine have changed, yours might have changed different because you are a different person, and we would love to hear about your examples. But if you're just hanging out, all good. If you're doing some work and you want to share with your, what you're doing, I'd love to hear it as well. If some people like to use these as kind of just work along like body doubling streams, and that is all good. I'll just be over here running my mouth about how your planner can change based on how you have changed. But yeah, new chapters in life generally require changes in how or what we plan. Exactly. I very much agree with that. Because, if we think about it in terms of just time in general, I have been doing journaling, DIY planning, bullet journaling, or whatnot, has been almost 10 years now. But that means that, life can change a lot in just a couple of months. So over a 10-year period, definitely can change. I like it, yeah, same color, haha. Looks like not much has changed. If you go back and watch some of my older videos that have this desk, even just the desk color has changed, because this thing here, right? This is actually just a piece of paper. This piece of paper has faded in the sun, so now it looks really purple tone. And every so often people are like, wow, I love your purple desk. That's like so cool. I'm like, it is not supposed to be purple. That was not the intention. But yeah, I know, right? They're kind of a similar color though in terms of the actual kind of notebooks themselves. But of course, we do also have some other colors in the lineup. We've got a purple, we've got a green, we've got very, very many of the typical black, but we'll shove those ones to the side so that we can have a look through at some of the changes that you may have experienced in your kind of, journaling journey, or may be yet to experience depending on how far through you are. But I think yours went from a Bujo Beauty to rolling to doing agendas. Age. Yeah, that is definitely something that can happen. I think mine kind of like, it's like an ebbs and flows type thing. Some of them were a lot more decorative, a lot more kind of intricate in terms of doodling and all of those kind of things. And then some of them are just like real bare bones minimal. And sometimes it just changes month to month. And sometimes it's kind of, you can see a general trend in the overall planner itself as well. So that's quite interesting too. Let's say your Bujo changes as often as your ADHD does every 30 minutes. Ew. Yeah, I can find that, like, those kind of things can definitely have an impact as well. Don't worry, we're all aware of the rainbow. Oh good, I'm glad that I featured it enough, otherwise I'd get worried. But I do have a tendency to gravitate towards particular shades or colors. If I have a look at just the lineup of notebooks that I've used, they are typically for everyday journals a little more subdued compared to the bright punchy rainbow kind of colors, and I usually save those for other ones. Yeah, the jump scare we're gonna have when it all changes, yeah, it's definitely gonna change at some point. I would like to get an actual wood desk, but that is an aside. Yeah, Leuchtturm was the gateway drug to bullet journaling back in the day. Yep, definitely, and this was the one that everybody had to have. So I guess one of the ways that your planning can change is, even though we're all like, oh yeah, I'm like totally above trends, are we though? Are we? Some of us are just late to the trend, aka me. Whereas for others of us, maybe we're just like anti-trend and we go like complete opposite, but it's still kind of dictated by trends. But current trends in terms of like materials or layout types or designs or whatnot can definitely have an influence on our planning. So when I first got into planning, the be all end all, the only option possible was the LT 1917. And I was definitely an LT 1917 fangirl. Like, I was all up in there. I'm going to build out my LT 1917 rainbow. I started with anthracite, or this gray color, because I wasn't really too sure how I was gonna vibe with the brighter kind of colors, but I decided, okay, once this one was done, I really enjoyed this process, I really enjoyed how this kept me organized, let's go and start building the rainbow, but we'll build it backwards. So the first one I got after that was a purple journal. And I'm like, cool, got the purple one. Once the purple one's done, I'll go to a dark blue. Once the dark blue one's done, I'll go into a pale blue or a green or whatnot. I did not get that far because eventually one of the things I noted was LT 1917s weren't really for me. Yes, they were the kind of big trend when I started. That was the one that most people were using. We had a couple people using like Moleskine journals and some people using other varieties of like lesser known brands or whatnot. But because this one was the kind of way I was introduced to it, and because this one was as popular as it was in the community, it's like, yeah, are you even doing it right if you're not in an LT 1917? That definitely influenced my planning. But of course, the supplies that we're using can also have an influence on our planning as well. So we jump into, actually, we'll probably jump into this one maybe. I don't know which one it's in. We're going to jump into this one. It is the first one. It feels right. But, so first one here. And in terms of the way that I was doing my planning, I did enjoy having, some novelty in my layouts, a little bit of decoration. I was mainly just using tape. I didn't want to do a lot of drawing. This is when I got one of those like multi-washi sets. And I'm like, I'll just swatch them all out. Looking at them now, I'm like, I would not use any of those. But see, I did like, my cover page and such. And we have like horizontal habit trackers and quote pages and word of the month and just very exciting stuff. This was my go-to layout for the longest time, just having this horizontal section for all of my events and then having separate spaces to write out my task lists. But eventually I got to a point where I wasn't just using tape and basic pens. I wanted to start using a bit more, a bit more pop of color, kind of fun kind of layouts and more supplies and such, and in particular supplies that on this paper in particular didn't do super well. So if we flip forward, eventually we'll get to the point. This is why we have indexes. Not that Jess really uses an index, but I think it was around April time, I got myself a set of Tombos somewhere in here. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to use those in these layouts. I'm going to have that as part of my, I don't know, fleet of supplies that I was slowly building up. So you can see I was grateful for Tombos because I had only just gotten them. But one of the things that really drew me to that as a supply was this idea of being able to blend the colors. So I tried to do some of that. You can kind of see it blending through the paper. So eventually I'm like, okay, LT 1917 with the supplies that I want to be using now doesn't work. It's not a good combination. So I need to change what I'm using in terms of the materials, either the pens or the notebook or just like the combination of them, so that then I can actually use them in the way that I want to. I can plan in the way that I want to. Yeah, next is lobster, because you've been making your way through all of the Leuchtturm colors. That's so fun. I think that the color names are quite interesting. The only one I know is anthracite because it was my first one. But yeah, so this one definitely needed to change out the paper type because bleeding and ghosting was not my kind of party. It is something that genuinely bothered me with my planning, and if I get bothered by my planner, I don't like the way it looks, I wouldn't get into it. If I don't get into it, I can't be organized. So very much like needed to solve a problem there for myself. So eventually, I did move away from this one. But before we do that, before we go and have a look at other ones, other notebooks or whatnot, some layouts just not finished, all goods. A lot of my planning at the start was very much dictated by the styles that I would see online, not just the materials, but also the layouts themselves. And I think that when we first get into planning, depending on what reason you're getting into planning and, whether or not you feel like you need super structured layouts or whatever else, you can see a lot of similarities between the layouts you set up and the ones that were just popular in the community at the time. So this is very much like Boho Berry Light kind of a thing. All of the layouts that I was making were very much inspired by her because at the time she was the content creator that I was consuming the most of when it came to bullet journaling, just journaling in general, planning and whatever else. So there is a lot of similarity between the layouts I was using and the ones she was setting up. A lot of similarities between the like lettering styles and little flags that she was doing versus the ones that I was putting in mine. So it's kind of nice in a way to see that similarity, to see like kind of where I started. But eventually, once you get some reps in, you've got some training, you kind of starting to notice what is or isn't working for you in terms of making the layouts, then you'll see that the structures in there will also change. Definitely, that is one of the things that has probably changed the most. Like if we don't just think about supplies and the ones that I was using, it's also just the layouts themselves and the ones that I was including, the way I was structuring them, all of that kind of stuff. So I think that a very good example of this is the habit tracker. Habit trackers and I have gone through like many iterations, and oftentimes you see I would just fall off at the end of the month because I found that coming back to this style, it just didn't really work as well with my brain. Having to rotate the notebook for me was just a hassle, and I know it's only a small thing, but any kind of friction is going to be used by the brain as an excuse to not do a thing. So why give the brain excuses, make things easier, and it'll actually get the thing done. But so, eventually, I moved out of the LT1917s because I found that with the supplies that I wanted to use, with the style of layouts that I wanted to make, it just wasn't really working so much. And I moved into a slightly thicker paper notebook in the Scribbles That Matter. So, one of the changes that I noted in my planning journey is that when I first started, I was really excited about the idea of changing up my weeklies. Not necessarily every single week, but eventually, once I started my YouTube channel, that was when I was kind of really inclined to start playing around with different styles of weekly layouts. Now, this journal was not the one that was the start of the channel. That one was one notebook before, but every weekly layout that I had in that notebook was a different weekly layout. In part because I was filming them for the channel and I'm like, oh, it'd be nicer to have variety in the setup so that people can use them for inspiration. But also I was still testing out and trialing to find things that would work as well for me as possible. Whereas once we get into this one, I believe I did quite a few that were just like same-samey. Let's see. These ones were a little different because it was, partially on school holidays and then partially part of the term. So we've got a couple of differences here. This one didn't need to write a lot because I was out of school. Same with this one, was out of school, didn't really need to write a lot. But then when we get into August, September kind of time, those ones all ended up looking quite similar to each other because I just found a layout style that I liked and stuck with it. For these ones, I just moved the boxes around a little bit. So each of them had a little timetable spot. It had what my structure was for the week, some boxes for each day of the week, and then the positioning of those would just kind of move around based on where I wanted to put it. So there was a little bit of novelty, made it a little interesting. But then when we get into September, which was a rainbow theme, we have a difference between this one and this one, only in the sense that I changed the pens I was using. So these are obviously the paler ones, and this one's more saturated. But the actual styling of it after that is exactly the same for each of them. Now, this is the first time that I really started trialing with this idea of using exactly the same style every single time for an entire month, and I found that eventually I did get bored with it. So by the time I came around to the next one, I just decided to do something a little different. But again, it was using the same kind of thing for every single day of an entire month that eventually got boring for me. Even with the little differences of putting in the numbers different, it was still feeling very one note. So yeah, it eventually changed that as well. This one was one of my favorites. Not that we're talking about that right now, we're talking about changes, but I did very much enjoy this style with all the little modules. I love modular layouts in general, but this is something that I've come to appreciate from as much journaling as I've done. Like, as many iterations of my notebooks and planners and whatnot, you kind of come to appreciate the stuff that you will use versus what you won't, the stuff you like versus the stuff you don't, all of that kind of thing. So good times and great classic hits. Question, have you done a Kanban spread on the channel before? I wouldn't have I probably don't have one video just dedicated to it, but I will have included Kanban boards and spreads and such in idea compilations. For instance, we do have a video on the channel that's about work-related layouts, and one of the ideas in there is the Kanban board style. So it's around, it just doesn't have a dedicated video. Habit tracking, my nemesis. But exactly, right? Like, I found that eventually with trialing different types of habit trackers, I found one style that would work well for me, and that was this one. It was this vertical style, whereas turning the notebook and having to do the horizontal one didn't work as well. Okay, sure, I didn't actually complete as many of my habits as I would have liked, Can I tell you what these symbols mean? Absolutely not. I could hazard my best guess, but I don't think that that's going to be sufficient. Like, for instance, this little house one, I assume that is a 10-minute house tidy, but I cannot tell you with certainty whether that is the case. I assume that this dollar sign is not spending money, like a no spend day, but she didn't put a key in. I guess that's also the question, like, do you need to have a key if it's only supposed to be for this month, you know? Coming back to it now, however many years later, what year was this? 2018? Yeah, this was November 2018, which is, oh gosh. Okay, please tell me if you relate to this, but in my mind, it's still like 2021. You know, in my mind, it is not 2026 at all. It is still 2021. So thinking about this as being almost 10 years ago, in my mind, is just like, that doesn't compute. That's ridiculous. Yeah, the symbols key. It's like using color tabs when you read 1 month later. God only knows exactly like what is it. But very good point, Angela of the Woods. Tink. Alrighty, drink break. What are we drinking today? I'm having a water. There we go. I can maybe give it a 2023, 2024 at the most, yeah. And I think that also one of the things that is a big change for me in terms of my notebooks is that this one here captures a 6 month period because at the time, with the amount of layouts that I was using, with the way that I was using my planner in general, with the, you know, I would use one spread per week for a lot of weeks. This is when I used to put all of my social media stuff in here. That's a layout that changed. With the stuff that I was putting in here, just in general, I could use one notebook like this for a 6 month period. That was pretty comfortable. But eventually I wanted to put more layouts in, wanted to change things up. And so nowadays, with the system that I'm currently using, this guy is a 3 month system, or like, you know, quarterly system, 13-week system. So in this notebook we will have 13 weeks, whereas in this one we would have 26. So that definitely is something that can change with your planning, is not only just the like, you know, types of layouts and the supplies that you're using, like we've already kind of talked about, but sometimes the way you are planning will dictate what supplies you use and how fast you get through them and stuff, and that's also something that can change. And I would also like to, you know, now as we're 17 and a half minutes into this, I would like to preface this video by saying change is not a bad thing. You know, change is actually necessary. And so if I was sitting here trying to force myself to use the planning style that I had initially started with, then planning wouldn't work for me anymore. We want our planners to change so that they can work for us as best as possible, whether it's as an extension of ourselves, you know, second brain kind of style, personal knowledge management, or as a reflection of ourselves, or whatever it is that you've kind of like assigned to your journal or planner as a purpose. We want it to change with us because then it works as best for us as possible because we are changing. So if I'm going through this and I'm talking about changes and it feels like I'm talking about it in a negative way, just know that is not the intention. These changes, you know, some of them maybe we tweak or change things and they don't really work out for us, but I feel like in the long run, it helps us learn more about ourselves as planners. Talking about a change, actually, that is not so good or didn't work out, you know, sometimes we will trial something in our planners or in our journals that just isn't for us. And for me, one of the things that was not for me was trying a Neapolitan notebook. Eventually, after using the Scribbles That Matter for a bit and using a Dingbats, I was finding that even the paper in those ones was too thin for what I wanted to do. I was so very allergic to ghosting and bleeding that it was irking the ever-loving heck out of me. You know, changes, exactly. So if we go and have a look at, say, I think that this one here, right? So we've got this kind of like decorative panel that I've put in and drawn in, and you can't really see it through, but I could see enough of it that it bothered me. Like, I think you can barely see it on here. Similar idea with, if we go to the I was going to say the Monday cover page. What I meant was October, but this October cover page with this kind of like, I look at this and think Captain America, to be honest, but we can see that like there is a little bit of ghosting through here, but then of course I also drew stuff over the top to kind of like distract from it. So eventually I was just finding that the ghosting, not so much bleeding, that I was getting in these notebooks was still irking me, still irritating. So I ended up moving to an Archer and Olive. And, I did say that this was the section where I talk about things that haven't worked for me. Archer and Olive in general has worked very well for me. There is definitely a reason that I have kept that as my kind of go-to brand when it comes to notebooks. I do really enjoy their notebooks. But this one here, which was my second Archer and Olive, not only was it during a time where I was in kind of a planner slump, I was also in a life slump. It was also 2020, so everybody was in a bit of a slump. So there was a lot of external factors that dictated why this would or wouldn't work for me. So that's kind of something to work towards. I think actually this was 2019, so it was just getting to the end of what was really an awful year for me. 2019 actually was like a worse year for me compared to 2020, to be honest. But anyway, this is the thing. I really need to start labeling the sides of these notebooks so I know which year they were for. Gosh, this one's got a whole bunch of stuff on it from the Scribbles That Matter that is slowly deteriorating. But you want to buy a foil pen? Did you ever go back and look how much or what? How did I do so much decorations? I definitely do look back on that. We will talk about that as a point because that is certainly a way that my planning has changed and other people may find that theirs is kind of similar. But the reason that this one didn't work for me is not only all of the life stuff that was going on that was just hard, was the fact that I was using a Neapolitan notebook for the first time. But I'm also a persnickety biscuit. If you've been here for more than 3 seconds, you'll know that I'm a little particular when it comes to my notebooks and setting them up and all of that kind of thing. And I found that because of the way I like to plan and how many pages I typically use, as we kind of just spoke about, I would usually fit about 6 months in one notebook. But if you kind of look at the side here, you can note that we definitely have more than 6 sections. I mean, ideally you'd have 7 because you want your start of journal stuff as well. But we have, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 individual colored sections which go through in this kind of, I was going to say zebra order, but like that's not a really good description. Hopefully you're getting what I'm putting down or whatnot. So in terms of the way that I like to use mine, I intentionally fit my start of journal pages just to this white section. So kind of tailored what I was setting up so it would fit into this section. We have, the quote page, we've got the future log that of course barely got touched because I was still wedded to it, but it wasn't using it, my goals and things to do, and this must have been 2020. Okay, yeah, she can't even remember what year these things are for. Statistics, my schedules for posting, countdown to the end of the year, some challenges that I was going to do and then notably didn't do, some trackers, trying a 6-month tracker as opposed to a monthly tracker because the monthly trackers weren't working for me, and then going into each of the monthly setups. But my monthly setup, not only the start of month pages like the cover page and the calendar or whatever else I was using, but then also all of the weeklies and daily logs and everything else, that's not going to fit in just this little section here. So what ended up happening is that I would start putting things in, doing all of my layouts. Will I just mention here, I love craft paper and I love the pops of color on craft paper. Gel pens may be one of my nemesis, but like, it looks so good. Like, I do love looking back through these and being like, oh my gosh, this is so cute. I should do this again. No, but going in and getting these things done in here and putting all of these layouts in, I knew that I wanted to keep the same color paper for the entire of a month because I'm a persnickety biscuit. But then I would get to the end of this one, having set up as many layouts as I have, but my time wasn't over in that month. I wasn't done. So I flipped to the back of the notebook and started setting up more layouts for that month because I just wanted them to continue on craft paper. And thus, this supply in particular did not work well for me because it wasn't aligned with how I like to plan or like my particularisms around having each month in its own color paper or whatever else. Nowadays, I feel like I could probably I don't want to, say things that aren't true. I would be more at peace with doing it nowadays, I feel, but I also think that a Neapolitan for me, which is what this style of notebook is called, not zebra notebook, a Neapolitan notebook, I think that this would not work well for me for an everyday planner. Yeah, persnickety biscuit is so funny. A euphemism. First time hearing it. Persnickety biscuit is my way of saying that I'm a prissy, insert B word here, because I was trying to find, like, literally over the span of one weekend, I was trying to find a better way to call myself a prissy B word without actually saying it because it's not so YouTube friendly. So I call myself a persnickety biscuit instead. But effectively, it just means that you're quite particular about something. But yeah. So, although I did enjoy the experiment, I also found that towards, I think, anytime I used a blackout section, I was not vibing. That's why I ended up going and sticking all of these post-it notes because I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go with a neon theme just so I don't have to write on the blackout paper because that was just too much of a faff. Anytime I was doing that, I was barely writing anything in terms of tasks, which means that your planner isn't really working for you because you can't plan anything because you're not writing anything down. So with that in mind, picking out supplies, that is something that will change for us. I went into this with a lot of enthusiasm, like, oh my gosh, this is going to be such a fun experiment. We're going to do things differently. Definitely did, in the sense that I fell out of love with my planner and didn't want to use it anymore. So that one didn't work so much. But that's okay because, learning things about ourselves as planners, learning about what works for us, trialed a lot of different layouts so that I could, either use up pages or just test new things out or whatnot. Notably, haven't used another Neapolitan since, but have still stuck with Archer and Olive because it is a brand that I like. I like their designs. I like their paper. I wasn't getting the ghosting and bleeding, which had been an issue for me, which I guess that's also a good thing to note is changing our planning or like our supplies or even our planning style or the layouts we're using to solve a problem for ourselves. So earlier on in my planning, one of the problems that I had for myself was the idea of being able to see up front or ahead of time what my teaching stuff was going to look like. What lessons do I have coming out, mapping out when we were going to be doing what in terms of our lessons, so that then I had a better appreciation for how long I had to prepare materials. So one of the layouts that I made for myself was this one. This has been probably one of my favorite layouts that I have ever made for myself because of how helpful I found it at the time. Nowadays, I don't really need to use it as much, but now as I'm sitting here, I'm like, oh gosh, could I use something like this for my work? Would that be really helpful for me? Effectively, to treat myself like I'm doing school periods and go and put different things in for different blocks of time. Ooh, gosh, now I'm curious about it. But the way this one worked is I notably stole this sticker because I wanted to use it somewhere else. But I would have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So only 5 days because it was the school kind of structure, not doing classes on the weekend. Might have extracurriculars on the weekend, but I wasn't doing classes on the weekend. And then within each of those, we have weeks going down the page. So week 1, week invisible 2, and week 3. And then within each of those larger boxes, so like the Monday of week 1, we have 6 sections because we would have 6 school periods per day. So this layout was very much tailored to what I needed at the time because firstly was a teacher, secondly was at a school where we had 6 periods a day, thirdly probably other reasons. So as part of this, I would color code it based on what class I was teaching, and then once I had prepared the materials for that class, I could cross it off. So I knew, okay, you have everything. I see the invisible too, don't you? It's so sneaky. But there we have, our different color code to show what classes I was teaching, and then I just write in a general kind of title, I suppose, of the lesson or what it was we were doing. So for instance, these two ones were they were revision. We've got ones here for assembly because assembly would happen at period 4 every Monday type deal. And this worked so well. I loved this layout. I'm now very tempted to bring something like it back for myself. I don't know if I'd work with this kind of level of rigidity anymore, but when you've got this external system of the school bells, that kind of holds you to account. But this kind of layout, obviously I don't really need as much anymore, or at least not in this exact structure, because I'm not a teacher anymore. Life changes. Similar idea though, even if I had just moved schools. Maybe I moved school to a school that has, AB weeks, or maybe I moved to a school that has a 4-day timetable that then rotates or something like that. Maybe all the color blocks makes it feel like a Tetris setup. Definitely the vibe, yes. There could be other changes or other factors that would make this layout need to be set up in a different way so that then it could work as best for me as possible. if I'm thinking about fitting this style of layout to current me, then I probably wouldn't just have it for Monday through Friday. I would probably be dictating which days of the week it was for at the start of the week, because I don't reliably get both weekend days off. I'm trying at the moment to make sure I'm taking 2 days off a week, but some days they're a Friday, Saturday, some days it's a Sunday, Tuesday, or whatever. So I would probably be going through and labeling the days of the week for each week individually, as opposed to doing it just, based on a school calendar where it's Monday through Friday type deal. Also, don't forget, hydration is important. Tink. Right. Yeah. The self-employed life. I know, right? Which means that you don't not work, right? Isn't that how it works? At least that's how it used to be. I'm trying to hold better boundaries. But boundary holding can be hard. Wait, YouTube said this video was live 2 days ago, but you're watching it live right now. Is this real? The future, I don't know. I think that it went. Okay, well, actually, we'll just give a tiny sidebar here to give me, personally, a round of applause because I actually got the listing for this video up earlier than usual. Oh my gosh, she's such a put together person. Not usually, but this week it seems to be going well. So, layouts like this, they come out when we don't need them anymore. Life changes, you don't need them as much anymore. Whereas nowadays in my planner, not so much when I was using it at this stage, but nowadays I like to put a lot of layouts in for personal projects or projects that I'm working on. So if we jump into, current planner here, we have, for instance, this layout, which is just dedicated to my Notion revamp and the stuff that I want to do, tasks that I have to do to get this revamped in a way that I like. So this type of page wouldn't have been in my first notebooks, firstly because I wasn't using Notion, and secondly, I did not do a lot of project plan pages that weren't work-related stuff. So if we jump back into my first journal. Somebody should, and by somebody I mean Jessica of the past, should have gone and tabbed out some of these layouts so they were easier to find. But she didn't. So one of the things that I set up kind of close towards the start of this notebook, I believe, was my to-do list before term 1. So this was intended to be effectively a project list for all of my classes, and then just a variety of basic stuff that I wanted to try and accomplish before the end of the summer holidays to make it as easy as possible for myself moving into the new year. Because this was my first ever bullet journal, my first DIY planner or whatnot, or rather part of the reason that I started it is because I came to the end of my first year of teaching feeling like I was drowning. Like, there was just so much going on. I wasn't dropping the ball on anything yet, but I was expending so much mental energy trying to remember everything that needed to get done and having my fingers in all of the pies that they needed to be in and getting everything organized and sorted in the timely manner that I needed to, that I just needed some kind of external system to help. It just wasn't going to work out for me. So coming to my journaling and then trialing it out, I wanted to try and get myself as ahead as possible for the new year, because I knew that at this point in time, things were only going to get more more difficult in the sense of having more to do, but also, I guess, less difficult if you can prepare things in advance and have materials to rely on. It's kind of like this balancing act. You come to the end of the first year of teaching, and if you've got any double ups in terms of the classes that you taught that year compared to the next one, you're like, okay, cool, I've done, this isn't my first rodeo kind of a thing, I've got some supplies, I understand how the system works a bit more. But then you're also adding an extra class or maybe an extra 2 classes depending on what kind of workload you were on. Obviously, this is very much dependent on where you're a teacher and what kind of school you're teaching in and whatever else, but the system that we had in New Zealand, at least when I was first going through, was that first year teachers had a 0.8 load, then you go to the second year, then you'd have a 0.9 load, so usually taking on an extra class, and then by your third year you were a full-fledged teacher kind of a thing, you had the full 1 load. So I knew, coming to the end of my first year, being as scatterbrained and oh my gosh, as I was, feeling as overwhelmed, how could I get myself ahead? How could I make sure that I had gotten as much possibly done ahead of the next year while I had a bit more downtime, in the middle of report writing season? So I wrote this list for myself. Notably, if we actually have a look at the check marks, I I will always and have always been a bite off more than you can chew kind of person. I'm cool with it. I understand this about myself, but I also don't get as down on myself anymore when I don't get things 100% finished. You know? Wisdom of age. 10 years ago, Jess would be proud of current us, but anyway. So, what a sane way to approach new teachers' load. Only New Zealand. Yeah, I mean, there are some things that New Zealand doesn't get right, but I do think that at least easing new teachers into the system in that way, I mean, there's probably more that could be done, but it is definitely helpful to reduce burnout, I believe. But anywho, so this layout in particular, I don't necessarily use exactly it. I don't necessarily use this style anymore. Nowadays, I would probably be more inclined, like if I was going back, if I was going to be a teacher again and I wanted to make myself a list of things to do before term one, I would probably make it less of just a static list like this and more of a kind of Alastair method approach. So that's another thing that changes. We learn new techniques or new styles or new strategies to bring into our planners and into our journals that will also dictate the way that we do stuff. So if we think about it in terms of the functional things, one of the functional things that I have learned since making this list a near 10 years ago is that I can use the Alastair method or use a table kind of method to organize this information better or kind of like plan it out or whatever. Alastair? Yes, the Alastair method. I shall show you this method in another journal. So the Alastair method is named by somebody whose either first or last name is Alastair. Do not ask me which one, you cannot remember. But the long story short of it is that it's a column layout. So you have a column for each of, typically for when it's first introduced, it's like days of the week. And then you write your task list down the side. You can put a dot underneath whichever initial for whichever day you want to do the thing and then cross it off once it's done. So for instance, in this case here, with these little marks that I've got, I did some marking, some marking, some marking, some marking, some marking. So it's just a little kind of diagonal line there to say like partially done, whereas a full cross would be like the thing has been finished. A dot, like we have down here, which is in the Saturday column, is saying, okay, I want to do this task on this Saturday. Notably, I believe this was towards the end of a month, so it's not quite as full looking. But if we go to this one, another way some people like to do it is with this line that goes across. So you can see like, oh, this X is representative of that individual entry. I did do it for a little bit. I think this was for the first iteration of me trying the Alastair method for a weekly log or weekly list. Eventually I found that because of my persnickety biscuit tendencies, I just doing the horizontal lines, I'd get way too anal about making them straight and making them perfectly central, so I gave up on those. So if we go to October, I love this journal. That's why I got this one out. This one was one of my favorite overall journals. Mean Girls as a theme was just a lot of fun, but excuse my poor language, but it is a quote, so please don't sue me. This was 2021, but this was when I was really using the Alastair method and getting things done, crossing them off. I just loved the fact that you had a full column that you could run your eyes down to see the kind of status of the stuff you were working on, but then you also didn't have to specifically tie anything to one particular day, because often what I will do, like nowadays still I will do it, is that I will write myself out a task list for the day and I will not finish all of the things. So then it's like, okay, do I rewrite those tasks on the next day, which is just a whole bunch of rewriting, or do I just leave it there and cross it off? That's kind of my strategy now. So for instance, my current daily space here for Thursday, there is still stuff that I haven't done from Wednesday, but because it's on the same page, I'm like, this is fine, I don't care. I can just cross it off once I do it, even if I do it today. Because what matters more to me is that I got it done as opposed to when I got it done. The nice part about the Alastair method, though, is that you do not have to rewrite them because they're already written out for your weekly task list. You just cross it off on the day you actually got it finished. So, for instance, if we look at this one here, this task says return year 11 exam papers. I might just zoom you in a little bit so we can see a little better and hope that the camera doesn't choose violence. There we go. And we just turn that up a little bit so we can see. Beautiful. Oh, gorgeous. No notes. So this one here, return year 11 exam papers. I partially did it on Tuesday, partially on Wednesday, partially on Thursday, got it finished on Friday because I was slowly handing them out because kids were away or whatever. for marking the year 13 thermochemistry papers. I did some on Wednesday, some on Thursday, some on Friday, didn't get it finished, so that one would probably roll over to the next week, and somewhere down in either here or on this page or something, we would find that again. But I did really love this as a style. I still use this as a style sometimes. But if I were to remake that page that I had previously, given this idea we're talking about changes, one of the things that I would have changed about how I did that task list would probably be putting it in this style. But that's now. Now as I have come to really, really appreciate the Alistair method and the fact that you can use it for things that aren't just a weekly task list. You can use an Alistair method or whatever kind of table style for a future log as well, where each of these columns represent a month of the year. You could use it for project work as well. Like, can kind of set this almost up as like a habit tracker and use these different stages for having completed something and crossing off as you do them or whatever. I guess it's like, where does the Alistair method end and a regular kind of habit or progress tracker begin? I am not the Alistair method police, and I'm sure that Mr. Alistair Johnson, the creator of the Alistair method, thank you so much for going and looking that up, would probably argue that maybe he also was the creator or influence behind project trackers. It's the kind of thing, like, I don't mind calling it the Alistair method, but the TLDR is that it's a table. Like, calm down. It's a table with columns for the days of the week and then a column for what you need to do. but but I don't mind calling it the Alistair method because that's where I first was kind of introduced to it by. But zooming back out and turning the brightness down so that we don't feel like we're being blinded by the light. Can she remember how to do this without getting out of her chair? Yeah, she's a wizard. Oh, yes. So changing in the styles, changing in the structures, Another thing that is something that I eventually learnt about was the idea of waterfall tabs and Dutch doors and those kind of things. And so I would start to include those in my layouts. They aren't necessarily a functional thing always, but they can be. For instance, in this one, if we think about the way that I've set up this Dutch door here, the Dutch door has been set up so I have this decorative panel with October 2021 running down the side. I don't have to do that title for every single page because it's already here. Also, I will just say it was a really interesting choice to put the U for Sunday at the back of these two cards because I keep on reading this as STN. I'm like, what the heck is an STN? It's not a T. It's the gap between the U and the outside of the card. But these ones, we've got the little tabs cut into them so that you could easily like pick them up and flip them over. We've got the panel down the side here with the decoration, and then everything else is just put on these little Dutch doors. So that was one kind of technique that I eventually learnt about and started experimenting more with, which was a change to my planning. Like, it dictated not only how I would set up the layouts, but then also how much use those things would get. There's a bit of a novelty factor there, so that would help. Yeah, the white space versus the black space, exactly. And I think that sometimes when I've gone and put in headers and titles and decorative pieces and such, I don't have a good appreciation for how it's going to look at the very end and what my brain is going to pick up on the most. And right here, my brain is picking that up as that's a T, not that's a U. But at least from context, I know what it's trying to say. But if we flip back to the September pages, here I was also trialing a different style of Dutch door. Now, this one I found didn't work as well for me, but I do think that it is quite interesting because the Dutch door is just this lower section and it's done as this kind of, I guess, T shape where the side part is cut out. So I would have these checklists on the side that I could go and check off for each of the weeks was my general idea. So if we go to the first one, you can see for this first week, I did half meal plan. I did plan my lessons, I did my laundry, I did a goal check-in, I didn't time block my week. That's why it's got a little dot there. On the other side, for resetting, I got myself a nice drink, I didn't put on my reset playlist, I half tidied up my desk, I did do a brain dump, I did do a review open check, which I assume is things that have not been completed. Like, I needed to fit it into this really small section here. But I did really love the fact that you could have these recurring checklists for each of the weeks without having to rewrite them every time. The only problem I found is that this was also a period of time where I was really busy. I had a lot of tasks that I needed to do and not a lot of space to write them in. So picking the appropriate layouts for the season of life, that is definitely the kind of thing that I have come to find a better appreciation of because I have done this as long as I have. But it did require trialing and experimentation and setting up layouts that were so cool in theory, but I didn't end up actually using, like this one. It's like a, do you see the candle or the lady? Yeah, it's definitely like that with the T versus the U. So this style of layout, very cool. Love it. It's just that for this season where I needed to be able to write down hella tasks, which is now kind of similar to what I do, it didn't quite work. But, ooh, cool question. Love it. Do you think that starting a new journal is a good time to experiment with layouts of what you've been doing works fine, but not married to it? I'm going to read that question again so I can really ingrain it in my mind hole. Do you think that starting a new journal is a good time to experiment with layouts if what you've been doing works fine, but you're not married to it? It definitely can be. I guess it kind of depends. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's a good opportunity just because you're moving into a new journal, but sometimes people do like to just lean into the fresh start that kind of comes with the new journal. Good to note. Yep, I'm doing a school year based cyclic planning, so I'm heading into a new year. Like a new school year. Gorgeous. So I think that it can. There are kind of two schools of thought, I suppose. Some people say, like, don't introduce too much change at once. And if you're headed into a new school year, you've obviously got a lot of kind of differences and changes external to your planner, which could kind of like they pile on to the new load or the load of newness. So some people would say like, oh, that's too much at once. Whereas other people love the idea of really leaning into the fresh start, leaning into that idea of like a milestone, new kind of like this is the line in the sand, and really using it as a kind of way to capitalize on the excitement and enthusiasm of that new season. I fall kind of like in the middle, but towards the slightly leaning towards the let's capitalize on the excitement of the new milestone. I guess for me, when it comes to trialing a new layout, I need to make sure that before I go in and start testing it out, I've acknowledged, am I doing this just because I'm bored and I want to do something different in general? Or is this trying to solve a problem for me? Plot twist is a good way to switch mid-river. Yeah, exactly. Let's just do it again. But yeah, so trying to think about, is this addressing a problem that I have? Is this a fix to an issue that I was finding in my layouts? Or is it just because I'm bored and I need some novelty? Either is fine. I just think it is good to appreciate which one you're coming from, like which one is actually your main kind of reason, I suppose, because that will probably dictate how much you lean into the newness in a way, or at least maybe the way you approach it, or possibly even the kind of expectations we have on ourselves for how the layout gets used. I'm going to chug some water. We're going to continue this thought. Tink, make sure that you're hydrating as well. But alrighty, side question. I've got a question. Can I finish my July page? I forgot to finish it. You can, but also don't feel like you have to. I have become a lot more comfortable with just not finishing pages. I used to like beat myself up a little bit mentally, not physically, to say like, oh, you should have finished this layout. Rah, rah. I don't mind quite as much anymore. Is the tink like a cheers? Yeah, it's like when my bottle goes tink against yours, like a little kind of cheers moment. Tink. But thinking about the like trialing of new layouts, changing things up for yourself, which, oh my gosh, so exciting. Absolutely love it, because I am somebody who does crave novelty, which is kind of interesting because currently in my journals I am using a lot of the samey over and over again, but that's because I'm finding novelty in other places, I suppose, which is kind of like, that's filling the novelty need for me, so my planner doesn't have to. But I do like the idea of changing things up and trialing new things with a new journal. Oftentimes, that is when I will trial my new stuff. I also just go into it with the kind of lens of kindness towards myself. Not everything that we try new is going to work, and that is okay. Also, with the lens of curiosity, like, okay, I'm going to go in, I'm going to test this thing out. I'm giving it the trial run, the ooch, the good college try, as a way to find out more about myself and what my preferences are, not as a tool to beat myself up with when I don't use the layout. Like that's not the intention. I want this to be fun, right? Yeah. Always appreciated your philosophy of not letting your journal bully you. I'm glad, because this is the thing, right? If this is supposed to be an enjoyable hobby, whether that be the actual planning itself, because some people find the actual planning the fun, or the stuff that goes around it, like decorating the layout and all of those kind of things. I don't want my journal to be a place where I dread to get into it because I have all of these negative feelings around, like, look at this task list, you didn't finish all of these things, like, oh gosh, you're like failing as a planner. Ew, no, don't speak to my friend like that. That's so rude. Like, we're not doing that. Not about it. But it has taken some time for me to get there. You know, I used to be the kind of person who would go and backfill some of my layouts just because I wanted them to be fully filled in. It definitely didn't help. I think that, you know, I guess another change we can talk about is the idea of producing content for social media. That is obviously more of a me kind of change than anybody else. Maybe you, though, you know, Instagram in particular, I'm thinking. I used to take photos of a before, a during, and an after for all of my layouts. So I would have the line work that went into setting up a layout before I went and filled anything in. Not so much for the weeklies, but like, you know, for the weeklies, I might have a before the pen and after the pen type deal. But for something like my trackers, I would have a before we fill anything in, a mid-month check-in to say like, hey, here's how it's going. So when the snakes are only up to here, and then an end of month picture to say, here's how the snakes went. And that honestly would hold me to filling the thing in to, you know, start with, like actually getting in and making sure that the page was complete, especially in these kind of layouts where you can very clearly see an entry per day and you have to fill something in, because I did at least 2 steps. Like, even if the snake is midgy as heck and I barely got to like 500, 300 steps or whatever, you know, I still have to have something filled in. Whereas something like this, I could just, you know, not really fill in the end and be like, yeah, I just didn't read for those days or whatnot. So that would be something that would make me use my journal, because I knew I wanted to be able to take a photo of it to show it filled in after the fact. But that also meant that I honestly believe, maybe not the step data so much because it's tracked by a Fitbit, I just read it off there and shoved it in here, but something like this one here, say, you know, where it's my moods or whatnot. If I didn't fill in my mood on the day that it happened, there is a high likelihood of this just being like fake data in a way. You know, this little, looking for the extremes here, this little 6, which is what, the 6th of March? What happened on the 6th of March? I was sick at home. No wonder I was feeling poorly. My mood was trash. Whereas on the 13th of March, my mood was like, heck yeah. What happened on the 13th of March? I don't know, it was a Friday, so that's already a good start. So, I don't know what my mood specifically was indicated, like, you know, dictated by that. Did I write anything down? No. We went to the movies. Friday 13th movies. Oh, we had a movie day. Makes sense. It's Friday the 13th. We always have a movie day on Friday the 13th. Whatever, doesn't matter. So, in terms of using these layouts, I would find myself going back and filling things in just because I was going to post it online. And it's not so much that I didn't want people to think I was like a fraud or something, like, oh my gosh, what if they find out that I don't use my journal perfectly? Because you guys already know that I don't use my journal perfectly. Like, that's been the get-go. Like, from the very start, it has been exactly that way. You know, if we go back to my favorite tracker of all of my trackers, probably, which I'm pretty sure was in April. Where are you? And I'm so sorry. See, my favorite tracker. Obviously, I died. You know, using things in full has always been something that I have struggled with. And there was a period there where I would make myself fill them in because I was going to be posting them. But that does mean that some of the data in there isn't necessarily accurate. But then I guess there's also the question of, does it matter if the data was accurate if you weren't going to do anything with it after the fact? You know, what are we using the layouts for? Because that's also something that can change. You know, when I was setting up a mood tracker, it was very rarely because I actually wanted to track my moods, and more so because I just wanted to do a decorative layout. But because I knew that about myself, it didn't really matter so much how accurate the data was or whether it was really super usable after the fact. Doesn't really matter. Yeah, I love the idea of a mood tracker, but it's such an abstract idea of what my mood is. I know that sometimes, for some of my mood trackers, and we'll go and have a look, it was helpful to be a bit more granular with what I was actually tracking, as opposed to just an overall kind of like feeling for the day. But we go and have a look at another tracker in particular that I wanted to show you, because this one is very much the one that comes to mind, which I'll just like flip through the pages like this so you can see them as we go through. The good old days, the way back whens. You know, this is when I started doing printed headers. It's not actually when I started doing printed headers. I think I started that back here in January, because I wanted to use different lettering styles but didn't actually want to write them out myself, because while I can do different styles of lettering, it takes me a hella long time. So I'm just like, but yeah, not as bad as falsifying data to publish in a peer-reviewed journal. Exactly. And that's the thing, right? If I'm posting these pictures to show people ideas for layouts, does it really matter if the data isn't 100% accurate? Now, if you are tracking something for a specific reason, and that reason requires accurate data, then yeah, probably make sure that you are put that data in. For instance, for this one, I gave myself this little Coke Zero tracker because I wanted to see, you know, am I over consuming Coke Zero? Like, is it too much of a problem? It depends on your definition of a problem. When I did this, I was like, okay, it actually isn't that bad. Most days I'm only consuming like 3 or possibly 2. Every so often it's a 4 or a 1. It didn't bother me, but it was good to have the data there for myself. For this one in particular, it was important for me to be accurate about that though. Whereas something like the one that I'm actually flipping to, this setup was definitely a favorite online, but it is also one of the ones where I cannot tell you that this data is accurate. I can tell you that some of it is accurate. I also cannot at this stage tell you which day of the month each of these represents. I believe I started as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but that's just an assumption. Pretty sure it started at 1 here. I like the idea of working my way around. I love this as a visual. Oh my goy is beautiful. She's the reason for the season. She's the moment, but in terms of actually usability after the fact and accuracy of data, So I guess it really depends. You know, one of the things that can change, what are we using the layouts for? What is the purpose behind them? My purpose for this one was having a decorative layout, something that was, you know, creatively focused. It filled that kind of creative need for myself. Reminds you of Valaris. Oh, yeah, I can kind of see that now, eh? At the time, it was just supposed to be like a kind of celestial mountains kind of thing, but nowadays I look back, I'm like, yeah, it's kind of Valaris. But you know, if the need for this layout, or the reason that I gave the layout, the purpose that I assigned it was just to be decorative and a creative kind of cup filler or whatever, the accuracy of the data doesn't matter. If, for instance, the habit tracker, if the purpose that I gave to that one was, you are my accountability buddy, like, I will do the thing so that I can actually get in here and fill this tracker in so that I can have that kind of satisfaction of having it checked off, that is great reason. If the reason though was the usability of the information after the fact and finding patterns and trends between each of these, then maybe this isn't the best layout for it. Maybe something like the vertical layout would be better. So as my needs change, or as my kind of intentions behind layouts change, I would also have changes in my layouts. What a great question. What are those pens? They're so pretty. This is also part of the reason why this layout is probably half lies, because this gold is not a pen, it is a paint. The idea of trying to get my paints out every day, to fill in my habit tracker, to put in a little gold dot to say I did a thing. Paint? Really? Me? Nah. But like also, oh my god, it's beautiful, right? Yes, these are metallic watercolors. They are super, super shiny. I absolutely love them. The finish on them is gorgeous. But in terms of like time cost of actually getting in and putting them in, ridiculous. This dark blue though, that's a Tombow. This grey is a Tombow, but I didn't really use it on here. Beautiful though. Love it. She wouldn't do it nowadays, but she did do it back then. I feel like we need to go and get out some decorative ones that I set up, right? So if we grab out this one here maybe. So one of the needs that I used to assign to my planners was a creative outlet, like we kind of talked about with that layout. We're going to have a look at some of my more creative ones, and I think I need to go and get a couple other journals for you, and I also need to have a drink, so do not forget. Tink. I love them, but I smashed it with... I smashed up with everything. Oh no. Going through your old journals makes me want to join the team so I can see your back time gallery. That's actually a very good point. If you, first of all, if you wanted to join the team with a capital T, we would love to have you with us. But also, with the layouts that I have made for the channel, or as videos on the channel, or whatever else, we do have the layout catalog or layout library. So if you are part of tier 2 or tier 3, just remember that for all of the layouts that I've made or the ones that are idea videos for the channel or whatever, you do have that catalog that you can go through to look at those layouts. You don't have to go back through all of the individual videos. If you wanted to join us, we would love to have you with us. There's either the join button down beside the channel name, or you can scan the QR code if you wanted to check it out. I'm gonna go grab a couple other notebooks so that we can have a look at the decorative stuff. But just remember, if you are part of the team, you can actually use that as a resource for yourself. That's very helpful. Alrighty, decoration, where are you? Because the thing is, it's not that I don't decorate my layouts anymore. I do still decorate my layouts. I love having decorative layouts because if I like the way my notebook looks, then I'm more likely to actually get in and use it. And so decoration for me has kind of been a functional thing. But the style of decoration has been something that I have changed a little bit over time. So this guy here, my little B6, my first B6 journal, which I definitely didn't realize that I was only going to fit 3 months in here, which nowadays isn't so much of a problem, but at the time I definitely needed more space. But this was during a season where I really was using journaling as a creative outlet, doing my DIY planning or whatnot. So we've got some kind of collagey styles, that's something. But then we also have the ones that were kind of drawn decorative. So going in and actually drawing out layouts as opposed to using stickers or tapes or collaging materials or anything else. Because at the time, this was the style of creativity that I was really enjoying and in love with. And I loved that. So, why is a B6 smaller than a B5? I like to think of it as number of times they cut the paper. So it's like, oh, you cut it 6 times, so it got smaller. Like, they started with their B paper, and then they cut it once, and it was in half. And then they cut it twice, and then that was in half. And then they cut it 3 times, and then that was in half. The B size paper, like B0, must be massive, though. But yeah, B6 smaller than a B5 because they cut it 6 times. But at this season, at this point in my journaling journey, it's exactly what I said. Wow, I unknowingly knew a thing. I really loved the idea of doing these kind of hand-drawn creative layouts, going in and doing this kind of like blue like line work kind of stuff, I suppose, with my Tombos, going in and drawing out all the little fireflies. I love this setup. But nowadays, she would not do this as much anymore. Do you use Dutch doors in your setups? I definitely do. We're going to look at an example of that in just a second for you too. But yeah, so we've got that. We've got all of these little bits and pieces, super, super cute. And then another one that we had, which was another creative one, was this one here, which notably I had to stick down because something started peeling up. So there's a little bit of tape just like in the middle of the page here. But this one was kind of inspired by the idea of a wheel of the year. So I didn't draw the feathers. I didn't draw the bird leaves. That's just a tape. But then the outside kind of border and then the ribbons and such, that was all drawn in by me. And this was so much fun. This is what I loved at that time. Nowadays, I don't love doing that as much. And I look back on these and I'm like, how did she even? Oh my gosh, past her was so talented. Nowadays, I just wouldn't be one to apply the time, effort, and energy to do it. But at this season, at this point in time, I was, thinking about changes. One of the things that changed for me was my preferences when it came to how I was doing my decoration, not only just how I was setting up the layouts, but yeah. You will now forever call a bird leaf. Yep, bird leaf. I never actually had my drink. Tink. So that's something that has changed. I'm glad you like the theme. Yeah, I liked it so much I did it twice, honestly. I did it here in October of 2022, and then I ended up doing it again in my yearly collections journal, because that was something I used to have, It's not just what journal you're using, but what kind of combination of journals you're using as well that can change. So we have it here again just with the purple as opposed to the grey. This one just had general font kind of stuff, different types of trackers, little ribbony bits poking out the side, another little wheel kind of structure down here. I remember setting this up and it going into the wee hours of the morning. I finished the setup for this because I wanted to do it all at once for some reason. I finished it at 4 a.m. because I started too late. Like a fool! But it's fine. I learnt. You know, there we go. Got it again. That wheel and then the ribbons and such. But gorgeous fun. Logs got auto corrected. All good. From Western Australia. Nice. Thank you for being your comfort creator. Oh, you're so welcome. I'm glad. It's nice to know that there are people who see my content in that way. I very appreciate that. So this style of decoration, it was a vibe. She loved it for a time. Then she went on to doing things more like, you know, with the floral PET tapes from the washi tape shop, of course. You know, that was a style that I was using quite a lot for quite a while. Got a little Dutch door in here so that I could cut away the top of the page and didn't have to redo the header. That was something. So put that one to the side. But thinking more about those drawn ones, you know, back when that was the style that I wanted to do, you know, having these larger quote pages where I would do a little bit of decoration on these. These ones were like these big ones with the black and white in particular. They were recreations of quote pages from Aura Arts over on Instagram. They do absolutely amazing lettering and quote pages and such. Always in awe. Always. Caught up from 2 times speed and now you're in slow-mo land. It's okay. I'll speak a lot faster so that we can get through this quick. No, I'm kidding. I definitely do that. I use 2 times speed to catch up on live streams and then end up having to go back to regular speed and be like, oh, wow, real life is slow. But I know that there was a question before about using a D20, but I can't remember where it went. Yeah, what inspires you? Do you use a D20 or a list or some other scrying technique to determine the theme of the month? Usually it's just like a combination of vibes and what I actually have access to at the time. At the moment, I'm kind of in a season of trying to use things in my stash without going and buying a whole bunch of other stuff. So it's like, okay, well, what do I actually have on hand? Thankfully, though, I have a year's worth of sticker sets from Hubman and Chub Girl right now, so that's kind of dictating my themes. Whereas back in these days, 2021, it would just be what was interesting or a curiosity point or, you know, of interest in general at the time. I had this little page of the different themes that I was doing. Didn't love it, TBH, but, you know, drawing out the rainbow theme. And then we've got, what, February's one, which was a bee theme. So this is the one where I was trialing a whole bunch of Dutch doors because I was just really into the idea of them. So I wanted to have a Dutch door for every single weekly setup. So, you know, habit tracker, steps tracker, of course had to be hexagonal because bees, you know how it is. So we've got the first Dutch door iteration, which was this vertical one. So we could see the habit panel on the side and then have a to-do list and Sunday and Saturday or weekend days underneath. Then the next Dutch door was a horizontal one, so at the bottom of the layout, so that we could have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, flip over Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then down the side here we had the meal plan and such. So this one was another vertical style, but it was a tip-in, so that's why we've got the tape, because this is a separate piece of paper, probably that I cut off from an earlier Dutch door, so that I could just go and put in a little bit of extra paper for that Dutch door panel. So that worked quite nicely as well. Yeah, this is so beautiful. It could be a coffee table book to just look at and just read through all of my tasks. Like, oh, you should pack for camp. She didn't do it. She probably packed for camp on the Monday or something like that. But actually, I think I probably did pack for camp because I crossed off the tasks here, so details. But all of these ones had a little Dutch door, just depending on what I felt like at the time. We had like the ocean kind of theme or like the nautical theme, I suppose. And I look back on this now and I wonder, like, oh gosh, could I draw that now? And yeah, I probably could. It would probably take me just as long because I look at it now, looking, you know, here, I'm like, oh my gosh, wow, she did amazing work. But that what I don't appreciate at this stage now, as I'm this far removed from March 2021, is how much time she spent, you know, looking up reference images, penciling it in, you know, putting in where she needed to put her stippling and shading and such. Because while I can go back and watch the video of me drawing it out, that does not have the prep work that went into sketching it out. And also it's all kind of like, I don't know, what's the word? Sped up, time-lapsed, you know? So I can sit here and be like, oh gosh, you know, current Jess would never, current Jess could never. She could, she just wouldn't. But, so definitely something that could change with your planning. Let's see. My brain does not work in those dimensions cutout ways. I need a step by step. I see. We do have videos on the channel that are step by step if that helps. Did Jess say Aura Art? She did, but it's with an O, not an AU. So I think it's like ORAS, like Aura's Art or something like that. It's been a while since I've been on Instagram and actually seen her stuff though. That was from quite a while ago. Alrighty, so you have a suggestion to learn how to hand letter. I really try it. I don't like how it turns out. I mean, it's gonna be an unfortunately very unsatisfying answer, but I'm gonna say it anyway because I have to. It's practice. But seriously, right? Like if we look back at the, stuff it. Let's look back. If we look back at the lettering that Jessica thought she ate, she's like, oh my god, she left no crumbs. But she didn't say that because it was 2018 or whatever. I think it was like 2016. We look back at some of the lettering that I had here. Okay, there's a way too big of a gap between the E and the M here, so that doesn't work. This style of B is not my personal preference anymore. This kind of curvature on the E is too tight. This R, the loop should come up higher. Like, we can sit here and critique it all day and such, but she was a learner, all right? And we're not gonna, yuck someone else's yum. We're not gonna crap all over past Jess because she had to do this style of lettering so that she could get to a point where she could do better lettering, we compare this kind of December with my janky ass line work and my inconsistencies and my weird kind of spacing between the letters and what I would consider to be an incorrect thickening of downstrokes. Sure, we can crap all over it, but she needed to do this so she could get better. I got better. Let's see, where's another example of lettering that actually looks a little nicer? All right, this one doesn't count. I didn't do that. That's a computer. Typed it off, printed it off. But if we go to something that I like a little better, like, June here, it's not perfect, but I like it a lot more. That's because I got a little bit better with my pen control, got a little bit more reasonable with how I was thickening downstrokes. Obviously, this is a different style of lettering. But I suppose you would tell me for practice and suggestion on how to practice. Great question. So my recommendation for practicing for lettering in particular, if you want to, you can just go on YouTube and find different video tutorials. That's a great way to do things. People guide you through it. There are actual people who, do this a lot more professionally than I do, and they will take you through step by step. Love that. If you like to take the struggle boss approach though, what you can do is find a nice font online that you like and just practice recreating it. The thing with practice is that intentional, mindful practice is always going to be better than just kind of passive, like, oh, I redrew the same thing over and over. You almost want to, if we're thinking about it in terms of like doing your drills, pick a letter, draw the letter, critique your lettering against the original, and intentionally try and make a change. So if we think about it in terms of like, okay, I drew out this J or whatever, and we're comparing it to some hypothetical other one, maybe the way that I've done it, okay, the thickening on the downstroke right here got a little inconsistent. So when I go to do the next iteration, I'm going to make sure I go kind of slower at that point. I'm more intentionally focused on that point so I can be sure about how I'm applying the pressure of my pen as I turn it to do this kind of like swoop of the J. You're getting very much like laser focused on the part that needs the work, as opposed to just drawing the letter J out over and over again and then just being like, okay, well, I drew it a bunch of times, I guess that's practice. No. We draw it a bunch of times. We go through each of those letters and say, like, which one of these looks most like the one I want, and think about how you approached that one. It does require a lot more kind of like focus and attention, but it usually has more payoff in terms of your actual like learning of the process. But if you wanted somebody to help guide you through it, I'm probably not that person, but there are really, really great tutorials online or kind of like free mini classes almost that you can find on YouTube where people show you individual letters and how to draw them and such, and how to hold your pen and what materials are going to give you the best results and all of those kind of bits and pieces. I just joined the team with a capital T. We are so glad to have you with us. Thank you for being part of it. I hope that you love your perks and benefits for being with us. But another way that things can change, notably we've talked about it in terms of the supplies or the kind of like layouts that are going to work best for you or anything like that. Sometimes we just need to change things because we get bored. And that is definitely a reason I've changed. This notably is a B5 journal, and I moved into this because I was starting to get sick of A5 journals. And then the one after that I tried for that was a B6, which was definitely a choice because the size difference between this behemoth and this guy is literally, he is half the size. I did like this one more though. I found that I didn't want to decorate in this one as much because I just found it too daunting. It was just too big. Whereas in this one, I found that the decoration felt a lot more approachable and fun. But then having to balance that decoration with the amount of writing space I needed, a little bit difficult. Shrinkflation, yeah, a little bit like that. So, new teamer, yay! Thank you for being part of the team with a capital T. We're very glad to have you with us. And remember, if you're in tier 2 or 3, you get access to that premium resource library. You get access to the layout catalog. So it has pictures of all of the layouts that we've shared on the channel, or at least as many as I remembered to photograph. I'm sure if there's any missing, you just tell me, I'll go make some more pictures for you. But it just helps to have that static image that you can kind of zoom in on and count box grid spaces and all of that to be able to recreate things if you wanted to. So love a B6, general preferences just change, right? Currently, I have a preference towards a B6 or an A5 as opposed to a square, whereas previously I've loved a square. In fact, I do still kind of love a square, honestly. Square journals are a great size, but with the type of planning that I'm currently doing, the style of planning I'm using, it doesn't work as much. So I guess if we're thinking about specifically my changes and things that have changed in my planning that have dictated where I am at now, one of the changes that I have had has been reducing the number of notebooks I use in my lineup. Previously I did have a yearly collections journal. This one has lasted a few years. Was first used in 2022? Yeah, 2022. So this one lasted from 2022 through to 2025, I believe. I think this was 2025. She didn't put a year in here, but that's okay. I think this was 2025. So that was, a change, something that was a little different, going from having this being a yearly collections journal where I would have those layouts that would last me a full calendar year to then realizing you don't do things on a yearly basis. You are a quarterly planner. A year is too long for you. So setting up all of these layouts that you're then going to, in theory, hold yourself to using across the entire of the year doesn't really work because you really love having those natural kind of changeover points that happen with for some people, the seasons. But for me, it's just like a 3-month period of time. So tink as well because the mouth is like, please hydrate me. I'm dry. Oh, I'm glad that you love the community. We love having you as part of the community, right? It's people like you that make this community the way it is. But also, you love the RPG theme. Yep, love that too. I thought that the RPG theme was really fun. And life admin gamification, that was a change that I had to my planning. And thus I had layouts and structures and set up styles in my planner that helped with that. If we jump into this chunky boy here, oh, yes, right? Got into doing themes that actually required me to stick things into my notebook and thus made the notebook a lot chunkier. I love this notebook though as well. This one was a lot of fun. So changing the way I was doing things based on quarters as opposed to doing them based on the full year, that definitely was a big change. Changing to go to this RPG kind of system. So I had my projects with different point amounts and the rewards I was going to give myself for meeting them and whatever else. Changing in terms of how I wanted to do my start of month setups. So rather than just having a cover page for the month that was more of a kind of decorative or something that was there to fill a creative need, I wanted something that was going to fill a functional need for me and help me feel like I had planned out the month ahead. So listing the goals that I wanted to work on across the month, listing out the action steps that I wanted to do, my life admin RPG stuff, kind of looking ahead in terms of things that I was excited for or nervous about so that I felt very prepared moving into the next month. That was something that was important for me in this season, whereas the way that I approach that nowadays is a little different. Changing the style of my monthly, quote, quote, monthly calendars to be just a 4-week system because this was a cycle. So it's sure I called it January, but it's really cycle 1 kind of a thing. So that was something that was going to be a change that was necessary for my notebooks, for my planners, for my journals to accommodate the way that I wanted to plan so that it worked as best for my brain as possible. But I wouldn't have come to this, I wouldn't have figured this out if I didn't do all of the iterations that came before it with my janky lettering and the layouts that didn't work and the ghosting and bleeding and things where I set it up and had really good intentions and never filled it in or whatever else. But alrighty, question. Do you add your collections in the front, then layout weeks, etc. towards the back, or do you intersperse them? Depends on the type of collection and depends on when in my journey we're thinking about, because that is another change that has happened. So something that I used to do with my first journals, some of the earlier ones, is that I was particularly particular, a bit of a persnickety biscuit, aka Jess was incredibly anal, about the idea of having those kind of long-term collections or collections of things that you wouldn't just use them in that week or in that month. They would have to be at the front or have to be at the back. That was kind of where my head was at least when I first kind of started with things. So if we go to the start of what we're going to consider the start of journal pages, I started my first journal on the 4th of November 2016, I believe. Yeah, November 2016. So it meant that this part here is really just November, December. So we're going to ignore that for a second. But when I was setting up for the new year, setting up for 2017, I really wanted to make sure that all of the collections that I thought I was going to need were going to be right at the front here. That is not necessarily what happened, but in setting the layouts up that I was thinking of, I did also remain mindful of the fact that I might think of other things later, and I tried to leave myself a little bit of a buffer so that I could come back and put some things in. These kind of things got put in, I think, a little bit later than the other ones, because I left myself a little bit of space to come and add stuff just in case I needed it. But there was a point that I got to with my journaling where I found that even if I left the space for it, I just wouldn't be inclined to come back and put things into the start of journal setup. I'd be more inclined to just flip to the back to add them, or I'd add them into the month that I was currently in. Kind of depended on what it was. So start of journal pages here. Notably, the stuff that I have at the back of this one is mainly just a mess of pen testing and writing down little checklists and all of those kind of things. Mainly because I got to a point where I was getting a little sick of just this notebook and felt like I needed to move into a new one. But if we go into the next one that I haven't gotten out all of my journals, but I do at least have the first two out here. Did a similar kind of thing where I really tried to make sure I had enough space up the front here to include all of the layouts that I thought I was going to need and a little bit of buffer to add in some more stuff. And then once I had those all filled in, I got underway with the months. But I eventually, I'm pretty sure it was in this notebook, found that any of the collections that I wanted to add in here, I didn't want to have to come back to this specific notebook to find them, because they were going to be the kind of information that I would want to reference time and time again over multiple journals. Because each of my journals would only last me 6 months, I would usually want to be setting up these layouts that I want to reference in 8 months or maybe a year or even further, beyond that. So what I did was set up a completely new notebook that was called my long-term collections journal. That has definitely been a change that I've made. I've had many an iteration of the long-term collections journal. If you were part of the team with a capital T, then a video that came out, I think it was last week around this time, was a kind of history of my planner graveyard. So if you haven't watched that one, no spoilers from me, but you may see a long-term collections journal in there. So those kind of things I was putting aside into that separate notebook. But eventually I found that the stuff that I was setting up in there, it would just be better in Notion. So I've moved a lot of those over into Notion. In terms of other collections, though, nowadays when it comes to my collection pages, if I have something that needs its own separate kind of space, and I guess just for the sake of clarity, when I use the word collection here, I'm thinking about any kind of layout in your notebook or in your planner or in your journal that just collects one type of information. Usually for me, if it is going in my planner, it is a checklist style collection, or it is a collection where I'm going to check things off. It is not a reference. So it's not going to be, for instance, if we go and have a look at actually the notebook we were just in, one of the collections that I had in here was lists of games that I had. So I had them kind of alphabetized, like, oh yeah, all the games that start with E, all the games that start with F, with G, yada yada. And then I had a color code, I think, based on where the game was. So, is it Xbox or Xbox 360 or like computer game or whatever. And also my status in terms of whether I'd played them. Something like that. Can't tell you what the colors mean, but that's kind of the general thinking of it. This type of thing I would no longer put in a notebook because I wouldn't want to have to come back to either one specific notebook from my long history of notebooks to find it, or I wouldn't want to have to update it in an analog system. I'd rather have it in a digital system where I could reference that information on the go, especially if we're thinking about, games I own. If I'm down at the shop and I'm like, oh, do I actually already have this edition of Sleeping Dogs? I don't know. I don't think I even have that anymore. It would make more sense to have that digitally where I can just access it on my phone rather than having to either have my planner on me or my notebook on me, which would be a lot less likely, or just try to remember, rely on my brain, which then defeats the purpose of having it recorded. So those types of collections I don't put in my planner anymore. The types of collections I put in my planner are more so the checklist style, where it's the kind of thing where I'm going to be completing a project or doing work towards one particular thing. Thus, I've collected all those tasks in one spot. So an example of that for me would be like this Notion project page. It is a collection in the sense that we're collecting one type of information together of just the tasks that need to be done for this very specific thing. Why Storygraph is so helpful at the bookstore, right? You have that kind of digital access to something where you can, see what it is that you have without having to tote your notebook around with you, which can be very helpful. Let's see. So, hopefully that answers your question about whether you'd include them. Nowadays, most of the time, I will include them at the point of use, like where I'm most likely to be using it. So, currently, Notion is a project I'm working on, not necessarily exactly in week 32, which is the current week for me, but it is going to be something that I work on this month. Thus, it is in amongst my monthly pages. I also don't mind so much not having it at the start of a month. It is preferable for me to have it at the start of the month. So, I have my project pages or little mini project collections here as part of my monthly or cyclic setup. And it would have been nice to have a Notion spot in here as well. But I didn't have the checklist organized. I didn't know what tasks I was going to need to do at the point of setting this up. So I didn't want to include a space for it and then not have it be enough space. Because as you can see, I filled up this entire page when I thought I was possibly only going to fill up a column. So I'm glad I didn't guess ahead of time and kind of try and tuck it into this layout and then not have enough space for it. But hopefully that helps. Hopefully that answers your question. Depends on how I am going to be using it. Depends on, honestly, the most likely place I will look for the information is probably the biggest question I ask myself. If I was looking for that information, where would I default go to? What would be my most kind of reasonable kind of thought process around that? And a lot of the time it's either, oh, this is a reference, it's in Notion, or this is a monthly project or something I'm working on right this very second, it goes in here. Or in the case of those kind of teacher collections that I had before, I used to keep all of my teaching related stuff at the back of the notebook because then it was a lot easier to find. I find that the very front of the notebook, the very back of the notebook is prime notebook real estate. That is definitely where I will collect things so that then they are easier to go and jump to. So like in these ones, I started making printables, gave myself a little sticker in here. This is my swatching pages, but after that, we're right into the teaching stuff. So everything teaching related would go at the back. My teaching calendar, so I knew when holidays were. Checklists that I had for teaching related things would also go in the back here oftentimes. This is just notes about my next journal, but anywho. Alrighty, question. If you have to pick a setup, just one, which would it be? Which are your must-have trackers, sections, checklists? Great question. Now, I guess it depends on the picking criteria here. So if we're thinking like, some come to mind, like top tier setups in terms of like the aesthetic, that's definitely a different kind of consideration as opposed to nowadays what are my must-have trackers and sections and whatever else. Because if we're thinking about like my journaling history as all of the ones that I've set up, uh, the ones that usually come to mind the most or stick out in my mind as a highlight are usually the ones that had a really fun decorative theme, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the layouts were the most functional. So if I'm thinking about that, it would probably be something like, that September one that we looked at before. The where are we? Where are you? I'm gonna keep doing that. That's my current, what is it called? Like vocal stem or whatnot. This is a theme that comes to mind anytime somebody asks me, like, what has one of your favorite setups been? Even if it wasn't necessarily the most functional. This was the first month that I had done in a B6, so that made it special. This was a theme that I had thought about doing for a really long time, but hadn't got around to it. And then when I did it, I loved the way it looked. I loved the way it came together. So that made it very special. I think that the combination of blue and yellow, it's so poppy. It's nice. I liked the scribbly lettering style. I had been wanting to do something kind of like that for a while. So this was very much one of those setups that just checked off a lot of boxes for things that I had been meaning to try, meaning to test out, and got an opportunity to do that. That's not to say that everything got filled in. That's not to say that everything worked out perfectly. That's not to say that I read the book club book that month and thus didn't really fill out very much of this tracker. But I did love it. That was very exciting. It was a good time. Good time in terms of just journal use, even though the weeklies ended up being a little bit bland because trying to do this style of decoration with a structured weekly setup in a notebook that was as small as this was a little bit more challenging, so I just did some pops of color. So if I were to do it over and had the time and the inclination, I would probably add a little more decoration to the weekly sections, but as far as monthly setup goes, gorgeous, love it, no notes. But if we're thinking more about the kind of second part of your question there, which was, what are your must-have trackers or sections or like checklists? I now, with my journaling, take more of an approach of what do I need for right now as opposed to a what do I always need. So if we think about my current setup, and I might go grab another journal out as well, like just my last one, because I think that a lot of the comparisons we've been doing so far in this video have been very much like larger jumps of time because it's usually easier to see a difference, but that's not necessarily exactly how our changes will come about, right? Sometimes we have things that change in a very short span of time. So let me grab another notebook so that we can have a look at this one. Let me grab that one. And might as well grab this one too. So, here we go. Coming back. So thinking about my current setup and the current things that I find to be essentials, to be honest, I do not consider this layout to be essential. I just like to have it. And I felt weird not having it. Like I would miss it when it wasn't there, even though when it is here, I don't actively use it. So I still put it in. It is also it's nice to have this to be the start of the cycle, I find, even if it isn't something that is as functional as it could be for me. There are probably better ways that I could use it. We've also got just a side question here because I saw it about book club. Yes, we have a book club. We would love to have you come and join us. It is completely free to join. That one is called Goober's Book Club. It has its own separate Discord server, which is where we go and discuss the books and all of those kind of things. So if you'd like to jump over and join us, then you can join us through that QR code. But I'll leave it up for a little longer while we chat about this. So this layout, it is not an essential for me. It's just more so I feel weird if I don't have it, so I wouldn't consider that to be part of the kind of like must-haves. Whereas something like this, which like not necessarily exactly in this format, but I do consider this to be an essential for me. It's just whatever project I'm working on at the time and making sure that they have a spot in my notebook. So I like to do these on a kind of like monthly or what I call cyclic basis, so 4-week blocks of time, having these different modules or different sections related to what I would like to focus on across those 4 weeks. The actual structure of these or what is included will change. So if we jump back to this one compared to this one, now B-roll takedown obviously looks quite similar maybe slightly different in terms of the structure, but same kind of information. Whereas Quicksilver was the book that I was trying to get through and trying to incentivize myself to get through by setting up a tracker. Whereas for this one, I'm getting through a 3-book series, Ruinous Love Trilogy. So because intentional leisure and in particular this annotation project are a focus for me right now, they are something I intentionally want to work on. Having things in my planner to help me work on the things I intentionally want to work on, that is something that I find to be essential, right? It's more so just like whatever is essential for me, whatever layouts are like, oh my gosh, I need to put this in here right now, they are dictated by what I'm working on at the time. They are dictated by what my goals are, what my projects are, or anything I want to focus on, if that kind of makes sense. So as I said though, that can change pretty quickly. So if we look at this one, I had in this current cyclic setup, we've got the cycle in theory, B-roll takedown, book project, merch making, meal log, 2 different types of trackers. So this is for leisure activities and work activities. We've got my work schedule, and then we're into the weekly setups. That was kind of the structure I'm using. But if we jump into this guy, this planner, which we're going to go to a month that actually makes sense because I also was traveling during this period. So for this one, we had the cycle in theory, so sames. We had a much different style of work output because it's a lot bigger. I kind of split this into 2 different iterations for the one that I'm currently using, mainly as a way to solve a problem, right? The problem that I had with this is that I can't plan this far in advance for my work outputs because I can't be assured to do one thing on a very specific day. If I split it into 2 separate week blocks, it means that the planning that I put into this kind of layout is usually a little bit more closely, it's closer aligned to the reality of what's going to happen. So making changes based on needs kind of a thing. This one, I had a Goober Readathon planning page. Notably, I don't need to plan the Goober Readathon every single month, so it is not a monthly necessity in terms of my layouts. For this one, I wanted to start logging my expenses, especially ones that were like a little bit out of the usual or a little bit unexpected, or I might come to my, outputs from my bank account at the end of the month and just be like, wait, what the heck is that? So I would write them down so I knew what they were. I didn't use it very much though, which is why I didn't do it again. So that's why it isn't here anymore. And then we get into the weeklies, and the structure of these weeklies is different to the structure I'm currently using, because for this journal I was doing a column per day, but I was finding I either had too much space, or on some days, not a lot of them, but on some days I didn't really feel like I had enough. On this day in particular, I probably could have kept writing, but because I only had this much space, I started to edit myself before I put things into my planner. I didn't like that. So to solve the problem, I changed the style of layout. So I know that was probably a very long-winded answer for your question, but hopefully it did help. But I know we had another question. Scrolly scroll. So what did you finally decide on for your 5-year journal, or is it still up in the air? I was thinking of doing it once, but you helped me to decide. No. Okay. So as a side note, if you watch the vlogs, I think, or if you're part of the team with a capital T, or possibly a couple other videos I think I've mentioned it in, I have a 5-year journal, because that is something that I added into my lineup to fill a need for myself. The need being that I wanted to start doing some kind of style of memory keeping. So as a new need emerges for ourselves, usually that will have a flow-on effect for either our planner or our system or our lineup of journals or whatnot. So I included a new journal into my lineup, that journal being the 5-year journal, which I think I have somewhere close by. So we'll grab it out. So the 5-year journal, we have just like a section for each day of the year, which has 5 sections within it so that I could fill things in, 3 lines per day essentially for every day across a 5-year period. Along with that, we also have the start of the planner, which had little kind of monthly summaries. This is honestly the part that I like the most because I just get like the highlights reel, almost a little kind of snapshot of what was going on. But I've gotten to a point where given that this was a memory keeping tool, given that that is the purpose I assigned it, I now have a different memory keeping tool, which is our weekly vlog series. So I don't really need this one anymore. And honestly, I haven't decided if I'm going to go back and fill it in just yet. I'm in 2 minds about it. Either I go back, actually I guess there's like 3 possible options. Option one, I go and backfill all of the things that I haven't filled in so far, and I use the vlogs as a way to jog my memory as to what was going on those days, and then keep going and fill the rest of it in. Two, I just come back to it, not filling in those back entries, just, starting where I'm at kind of a thing, filling entries in from here on out and finishing it off. Three, I scrap it entirely. There are also other options there, but currently it's looking like option three, just because, as we kind of talked about at the, I don't know, half hour mark or something, I want journaling to be fun. And I don't want journaling to feel like hard work, and I don't want it to feel like a slog, and I don't like doing things I don't want to do, right? If this is supposed to be a hobby, why drag yourself through the mud trying to do something that is just, it doesn't feel cup filling or enjoyable type of a deal? And so, yeah, sure, at the end of 5 years, it would be nice to have this one done for the fleeting moment of satisfaction where I have it done. Is she actually going to go back and look very back like on this fondly if she made herself do it when she didn't want to? I don't think so. So given the fact that it's not so super fun, I think I can live with the disappointment of not having it completely filled in to save myself the annoyance over the next year and a half and all of the upfront cost of having to go and backfill entries. So currently I'm thinking like possibly not, just because I don't care. It's mainly like I just don't care. I am not bothered by not finishing a notebook. That doesn't bother me. What bothers me more is feeling like I'm wasting my time. That irks me. When you have as many things that you want to do as I want to do, which I assume that you can relate because you're here with me, it is frustrating when your time gets sucked up by something that doesn't feel like it's going to have the payoff that you're hoping for, especially when there are other things that if you did dedicate that time, effort, and energy to, they would have a much better payoff. So I'm kind of trying to think about my time budget, my effort budget, my mental anguish budget, and I don't think I want to assign it to that project. But anywho. Alrighty, sneaky side question. Sneaky updates on the possibility of building a house. Would love to hear you and Vogel talk about how you decided your must-haves and maybe the things that you wanted and didn't. So this one, this is kind of similar to what we're talking about with the whole changes and journals and in particular problem solving. Most of what we want in a house is dictated by the issues or annoyances that we have either in our current one or in our past ones or whatever else. Also, it's that kind of idea of like trying to fill a need, right? On the channel, if you've been here for a second, you've probably heard of the want analysis. I love the want analysis because it can be assigned to a lot of different life areas, and I think that building a house is one of those. We're going to get out a visual to look at just because it's nice to have a visual while we talk about things. So the want analysis, for those who haven't come across it, stands for W, want, like wins, A for aversions, N for needs, and T for to try. So in thinking about that kind of formula, which we didn't use exactly the formula, but it was kind of similar to the stuff related to our house, it's very much, what do we like about our current house? We want to make sure we still have that. A, aversions. What do we not like about our current house? We want to make sure that we have a fix or something different in the new one. N, what are our needs? What kind of things do we foresee in our future as being important? For instance, we love having people over. We love to entertain. We love to get in the kitchen and cook. We also have a lot of appliances that we would like to be more readily available in our kitchen. So we would probably like to have more space in there to be able to either put them out so that they're more readily usable or easily accessible or anything like that. Those kind of things. One of the aversions that we had for this place, I guess, which is more of a me aversion than a him aversion, is that Vogel is really bloody loud. I love him to bits, but oh my gosh, if I'm trying to film, please shut up. Or if it's games night, I don't care if the killer is chasing you right now. I don't need to hear it. I'm trying to read my book. So I wanted a floor layout that has my office space and his office space a little bit further away from each other. So, those are the kind of things we're thinking about. Similar idea with the journal though, that is the same approach that I take to my journal lineup, what type of journal I'm picking, the layouts that I'm including. Like, I do love the want analysis because of its flexibility. So if we're thinking about your journal style or your journaling supplies. Like, what's working? What are the wins? What are your aversions? What sucks? You know, some of the aversions that we've noted in this video are things like bleeding and ghosting. Jess doesn't love it. It could be an aversion to actually using a layout. I didn't like turning my notebook to use that horizontal layout, so that was something that didn't work for me. If we're thinking about needs, what kind of information do I want to store? What do I want to capture? How do I want to use it? If we're thinking about needs in terms of supplies, it's like, okay, I need something that maybe dries faster because I'm left-handed. Not me, but like you maybe. I need something that, you know, works well together in terms of the pen paper combination. I need something that is, like, you know, decorative because then I'll actually use my planner, but quick to use because I don't have a lot of time to draw out a whole bunch of doodles or whatever else. And then T, try. So that's really the kind of problem solving part. When it comes to my journal, it's like, okay, for those aversions, for the stuff that sucked, what am I going to try to do different to hopefully get over that? Or what are my needs? What am I going to try to use or include or do to address or accommodate those needs? So hopefully, you know, that is helpful, but I find that I do apply the want analysis to more than just journaling related stuff. But I know there was another question. I did see it somewhere. Somewhere. Didn't know you did lives. This is so fun. Oh, I'm glad that you're enjoying it. Yeah, we have one public live stream a month. So that'd be this one. Hello to everybody in our community. Huzzah. And then for the team with a capital T, we have one tier 2 live stream per month and 4 tier 3 live streams. So essentially every Monday my time, every Sunday other people's time. Tier 3 gets a live stream, which we call a work along session. We do something together, like usually working, but also chatting about stuff too. So how often do you suggest to set up the Bujo? Like, I'm setting up October because I'm scared to don't have it. Yep, that's fair. But clearly cannot update the setup whilst using my Bujo in August. It's kind of a balancing act, and I guess it's also kind of a personal preference. For the longest time, I would be the type of person who would, you know, set up their monthly pages. Notably wouldn't have all of this filled in at the start of the month. So I'd set up my monthly pages, set up my trackers or whatever else. And then when it got to the weekly stuff, I would just set up for the week in question. And I would set it up on the Thursday before that week. So if we're thinking about, you know, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I would set up for the coming Monday, the Thursday prior. That'd be Thursday. She can do math. Mainly because this one being very much dictated by my posting schedule, I would post that weekly setup video on a Thursday my time, and because I was still working full time, I would film it and edit it on that Thursday to be released that Thursday. But that was just for me. For other people, they're very happy to set it up on the Sunday before the Monday starts. Some people prefer to set up an entire month at a time, and then maybe halfway through that month they will set up for the next month. I found that if I set things up too early, I would not only lose enthusiasm for my current setup, but also possibly lose enthusiasm for the one that I just set up, because by the time I got to actually using it, I wasn't excited anymore. Or I would also possibly set things up with the way that my brain currently worked, or like what I was currently finding enjoyable or helpful, and then I'd get to the month that I had set up in advance and realize, oh, like, life has changed. It doesn't need to be a major change. It's just changed enough that this doesn't work anymore. Or I've, you know, got a new situation now that I have to accommodate, or something else. Because that, for instance, happened with that setup that I showed you guys with the September pages. I have so many journals out on my desk. I do not know where she's gone. She's around here somewhere. There we go. Starry, starry sky. Beautiful. Love. So this one, I set the September pages up. I can't tell you exactly when. I mean, I could probably go back and figure it out. We go back to over here somewhere. Somewhere in August, I would have set this up. Actually, probably before August. I think, yeah, I would have set it up really, really early, because in August I was going away. So I would have had to set it up before I went away. But by the time I actually got to use September, you know, having set up these layouts, thinking like, yep, this is going to be the thing that works so well for me, I then realized I had way more tasks that I needed to write down. I didn't have enough space to write them. And I had also recently discovered and or fell in love with the Alastair method. So because of that, I ended up setting up these layouts as well and using them instead of these ones here. I use them very, very minimally, but not really all that much because I just needed to have more space to write tasks down. So there is a risk in setting up too early. Maybe your situation changes. Maybe you find a new technique that you want to try out. Maybe you find a different style or supply or something that just sparks more enthusiasm and joy for you. Because remember, I want this to be fun, right? So that is definitely something to think about. But I am also the kind of person who likes to hit the ground running. I like to have my planner set up and ready to go on day one. If I come into a new cycle and things aren't set up, I'm not going to set them up, or I will set them up late, and because of that, I'll like drag my feet on it. I won't use it properly. I know it's all in my head, but I have to live in my head, and my head works better if I have it all set up ready to go by day one. I just need to balance that with not setting it up too early. Otherwise, as I said, lose enthusiasm, things could change, yada yada. So, grains of salt. You are your own person, notably, but I would just experiment with it a little bit. Remember, coming at it with that lens of curiosity and kindness to yourself, because we don't want this to suck. We don't want this to be another thing that we use to beat ourselves up. Nah, not about that. But just like kind of finding out what works best for you as a planner is really the most important. But hopefully that helps. Now, scrolling through, I know we had another question. Gonna read all of the bits. You have a question on the square? Feel free to ask it. All good. Question: do you like the bookmarks in your journals? That is a great question. So this has been something that has definitely changed about my planning. So previously, I would just take the you can barely see it. There we go. Just there we go. I would take the bookmarks and I would loop them back through the notebook so that they would stick out the side here because I wouldn't use them. And I still, for the most part, don't use them. The only notebook that I have ever really actively used the bookmarks in, the bookmarks fell out. And that was my 5-year journal. So my 5-year journal is now bookmark bald. It doesn't have any because one of them accidentally just fell out and the other one got caught under my boot and got ripped out. So that was a bummer. For the most part, I don't use the bookmarks because oftentimes, especially for my everyday journals, given that they are only 3 months long nowadays, I don't need to be able to find my place because I can usually just tell looking at the side of the notebook. You know, if we look at the side here, I can see like, oh yeah, you've used up to roughly there. So I can jump to that spot pretty quickly. So I don't really need them. For other people though, because they will have very specific reference information that they want to go back to time and time again at the start of their journal or, you know, end of their journal or their current day, they will use it to be able to flip really quickly to those. That's just not where my default is, I suppose. You love the sound effects. I'm glad. There we go. So what are the sizes of these notebooks? I'm excited for the new Archer and Olive designs that come out, but I don't know what size to get. Very fair. I'm very much in that phase of my notebook buying where I really want to purchase a variety of sizes because I do love to have variety, but I am also the type to typically tend towards a particular size. The majority of the ones we've looked at today have been A5 because that is what I consider to be one of the most comfortable sizes. It also is the most readily available a lot of the time, so if we think about it in terms of making layout ideas for the channel, it makes more... in my mind, it makes more sense for me to make it in an A5 because more people in our community and in the journaling community in general use an A5. But I do also think that there are benefits of other sizes. We have a separate video on the channel that goes into the sizes of notebooks and what you might want to use them for. But the ones in particular we've looked at today have been an A5, a lot of A5s actually. We also had a sneaky cheeky little look at Poink B6, so being a decent chunk smaller, but I love a B6. I just think it's a really cute size, very compact, very transportable. But we have also briefly looked at a B5, which notably is a decent chunk bigger to the extent where it doesn't actually fit on the screen just here. Let's see if we can zoom out so we can see it. There we go. So this one being a B5, this one being a B6, so half the size of a B5, you know, like you cut the paper again, and then an A5 kind of being in between those two sizes. So most people do use an A5, which is fine. A5 is a great size, love an A5. But then, you know, we've also got things like the square, which gives you the width of a B5, but the height of an A5. In fact, I think it's actually a little wider than a B5. I love a square journal. I think it's also really great for like waterfall, Dutch door tabs, and yada yada. It's a lot of fun. But It's not necessary to use a different size. You can just stick with your tried and true. A lot of people just stick with the one size and they're very happy with it and they use that for the rest of forever and it's all good. Love that for them. But I find that one of the ways that I can get that novelty factor into my journaling, and one of the main reasons that I do change notebook sizes is for the novelty factor. So yeah, it can be fun to try things that are a little different, but it also does come with its own challenges, I suppose, especially if you've been the type to use the same size time and time again for many, many moons. You've got particular layouts that work really nicely in the size that you've been using, and trying to transition those into a new notebook size can be a little bit challenging. That being said, there can also be benefits of moving to a new notebook size. Maybe if you've found that the horizontal space that you have in your A5 isn't quite right for you, then maybe moving to a square notebook could be good because you get a little bit of extra space in the horizontal direction. If we have a look at the kind of like weekly spaces, I suppose, or I guess this is technically a daily space, but my weeklies were set up with this like really kind of nice, larger horizontal space for each of the days of the week. Now, did I always need that? Probably not, but it did give me a little bit more room to play with. So then when I moved into the A5 after this one and was still setting up similar layouts, this started to feel quite snug because if we can kind of compare the pair, this guy had this much space, that much space? And then this one had at least half of that more. So depending on how you like to plan, sometimes a certain notebook size is going to work really well for you. It's not necessarily the case for everybody. Not everybody's going to work well with a square. Not everybody has their desk real estate to accommodate a square. Not everybody has the bag size to accommodate transporting a square everywhere. But for somebody like myself who, has a large enough desk, which is usually clear enough to open it and doesn't really take their journal out of the house all that often, this works kind of well for me, but not for everybody. So, scrolling. Alrighty, have a question on the square journal. Oh, nice. So, is it really useful when you bring your Bujo with you? Is it more of a stay-at-home Bujo? Great question. Very relevant to what we're talking about. I know you asked it a little while ago, but I do find that the transportability of this one is decreased for some people, because it is that kind of like just larger, a little bit more bulky kind of size. That's not to say that it is so incredibly bulky that it's not able to be brought around with you and used. Let's say something like a letter size, that is a massive notebook. That is a little bit more unwieldy again, but I guess it just depends on what else you're taking out and around with you, what kind of bag or transport method you're using. If you have a teeny tiny bag or a very, very full backpack already or whatnot, maybe a notebook of this size wouldn't work so well, or there would have to be other accommodations made to take it around with you. But I do not find this to be such a large size that it is completely impossible to take it around and use it. I do think that in terms of, sitting a notebook in your lap, a lot of people do find an A5 or a B6 or, for some people a pocket notebook is a lot more comfortable. This one is a lot wider, notably, but I don't think that it is I wouldn't put it down as the biggest limiting factor unless you've actually tried it out for yourself, because again, personal preferences, we're all individuals and whatnot, but yeah. So you always have your side journal, the Clever Fox series of journals, focus on goal setting as well. Yeah, that's also something to note, is that one of the changes that might happen with your planning or your planning system is moving from something that is your blank dot grid like I'm using here or whatever, to something that is printed or pre-printed, has a structure set up in it. And that could be something that either works really well or doesn't work for you. So I find that the times that I have tried a pre-printed journal, I have gotten irked because I like novelty. I like to be able to change things. I like to be able to put in the structures just what I'm going to use and not the stuff that I'm not. And I don't like trying to, square peg round hole, try and fit something into a layout that wasn't necessarily designed for it initially or whatever else. So yeah, trying to go and set my own layouts up is more preferable for me as opposed to a pre-printed planner. But for some people, the time that they're spending setting up layouts in a blank notebook like this would just be better spent actually doing the planning, whereas they could find a layout that works really nicely in a pre-printed system so they don't have to go and do all the line work themselves, and that can be a lot more preferable. Sometimes we will get to a season of life where we are going to benefit more from just kind of dealing with a pre-printed structure as opposed to trying to make things ourselves. You know, if I had gotten to a season of life where I was so incredibly busy that even drawing in the line work on these weeklies was too much, then yeah, maybe I would go to a system that already had those put in. Or possibly I would go to a system where I wasn't even using a paper planner anymore. Maybe I would tend towards a digital system that because I can type faster than I can handwrite mainly. You know, there are going to be other types of changes that could happen based on life situation, you know, if we get to a point where the stuff that we've been doing just doesn't work anymore. But that's the nice part, I think, about planning is that it's not one size fits all. You don't have to stick with what you start with. It can change with you, and I definitely think that it should. But didn't you have a big notebook before? A red one, I think. Ginormator notebook. I did. My Ginormator brainstorming book, which was a lined letter size Archer and Olive. And that one, I still have it. But it is definitely not one that I take outside of the house with me because it is my Ginormator notebook. It is massive. I also think that the way that I like to plan in general doesn't work in there, but the way I like to brainstorm definitely does. And that's also a good thing to note is picking the type of supply that works as best for you as possible for the type of planning you want to do. How did I even remember that? Because it was a staple part of the lineup. Even if it's not being as actively used anymore, it is still around right now. But yeah, I find that picking your notebook, picking your supplies, picking whatever else based on the function that you are assigning to it or the purpose you're assigning to it is an important consideration. And I find that over time, those needs, the purposes we're giving, they change, and thus the planners will change. So, anywho. I think I nabbed all the questions, but I might have missed some. I'm sorry if that's the case. Has the square notebook different sizes as well? I probably between brands. The square notebook that I have is an 8" by 8" from Archer and Olive, and I find that the other square notebooks I've used have been that size as well. Every so often they've come out with like a smaller one or one that's slightly different, but that was usually just a one-off. It's not been a kind of a ongoing kind of item that is regularly stocked, if that makes sense. But my reasoning for changing from an A5 to a bound printer is that it was a pain when designing the layouts by hand. Very valid. I find that for some people, you know, going to from a bound to a disc bound is mainly because they want to be able to change the positioning of the layouts. That has been something that has been, you know, bothering them unless they made a change to solve for that problem, right? So that's been, it's nice to take a kind of like problem solving lens to it, I find. When it comes to making changes in my planner, usually it is to solve an issue or a new need has arisen kind of thing. Like, you know, new challenger has entered the playfield kind of thing and we need to solve for that problem. But you have an A5 for me and a Travelers to move in life with. Nice. I like Travelers. I like the idea of a Travelers. I am very excited, actually. I'm going to be adding a new notebook to my lineup. And if you're part of the team with a capital T, in particular, I think tier 3, you're going to be seeing that one next week because we're going to have a video come out next Thursday, my time, which will be about that one. But I'm very excited to be adding a new notebook into the lineup and one that is going to be in a Traveler's notebook, so that's kind of fun because I think that the Traveler's size notebook can be really helpful for people. I mean, given the fact that it is literally in the name Travelers, that one is a decent size to travel around with. The size of that one is effectively like half of a square kind of a thing. I think it's a little wider than half a square, maybe a little narrower. I don't remember, but it is effectively half a square. So has anyone seen the new ANO double bound journals just released? I haven't. I'm very excited for their new release though. I love fall in terms of their fall release. It's usually one of my favorites, but I haven't gone and had a look at what they've been coming out with just yet. I think that they've recently put out the design that they're going to be doing for one of them that looked pretty cute with the typewriter, I think, on it, but haven't really gone and had a snoop at it. Anywho, do you guys have any more questions before we wrap up? I want to make sure that like I get all of them in here, but just as you send those through, if you have any, to kind of go over what we've talked about, right? Firstly, change is inevitable and it is not always a bad thing, right? Especially when it comes to your planning system, your journals or whatnot. Making sure that it changes as you change is actually really important for making sure that it still works for you, okay? Some of the reasons that your planning might change though. It could be about like a personal preference thing. Maybe it could be the style of supplies you're using, like the type of notebook, the paper in it. It could also be based on the layouts and what layouts are going to be most assistive or helpful for you at the time. It could be a life change, which means that you need to plan for something different or plan in a different way. It could be the kind of thing where you just find that, like, maybe your hobbies change and thus the layouts that you want to do to capture the information related to those is going to have to change as well. It could be because you want to experiment and try something different. Novelty is a great reason to change up for your planning, all right? What I would recommend though is if you are doing your changing in such a way that is like, user led. You are deciding to make the changes. Be wary, be cautious of changing too much at once. And if you're going to be making changes, making sure that we're doing it with those lenses of kind of like kindness towards ourselves, curiosity. Not everything we put in our planners and in our journals is going to work out. It might not work out the first time, it might not work out at all, but that's all right. Because then it's a learning experience, right? Like even the wins are a learning experience too. We're learning more about ourselves as planners, as about what works for us, what doesn't, so that then we can inform our practice moving forward and make our next best journal. And I love that for us, right? So the questions that we had: do you use different notebooks at the same time? I definitely do. And this is something that has changed for me, has been the kind of lineup or series of notebooks that I have been using. So previously I had like a decent lineup. If you go and watch some of the past my yearly lineup videos or whatnot, then you'll see quite a few of them. The main ones that I'm using at the moment have been this guy here, my everyday planner. So funnily enough, this is where I do my everyday planning. So this is very much a kind of functional productivity tool, getting things done, mapping out the stuff that I need to do for goals and projects. Then in terms of goals and projects, we also have a separate planner, that one being my goal planner. So this is where I plan out my goals and projects, so what steps I need to do over the entire course of a quarter or however long, whereas I just kind of move in the ones I'm currently focusing on into this one. I also have a reading journal, so that's another notebook, that one being for reading and media, so stuff I'm reading or watching or whatever, and capturing my thoughts about those. I also have a creative space journal. This one is a new one to the lineup. This one is going to be a space for junk journaling, just general kind of creativity and whatever else. Another notebook that is very important to me is my swatch book, because this is where I have a catalogue of all of my pens in particular, so that then when I come to do a new setup, I can pick supplies that match as well as possible in terms of their colour palette. That's something that is important to me. Notably, I also do technically have my 5-year journal, but currently that one's probably going to get retired, so we're not going to bring it out. And then I very recently started this one. If we go grab it. This notebook being my new R&D journal. So this one you'll see probably later this week on the channel if you watch it in a timely manner, question mark, question mark. But this one is for making layout ideas for the channel as opposed to making them in my everyday planner and filling up all the space in there really, really quickly. So yeah, I use quite a few notebooks at once, but that doesn't necessarily mean they all get touched daily. That does not necessarily mean that they all get the exact same amount of use. For instance, this one, I will go and fill it in when I get a new collection of pens, which is very infrequently. I will use it maybe once a month, so that then when I'm planning my new setup, I can go pick out supplies as needed. This one I will use anytime I am making an ideas video for the channel, but outside of that, I won't be using it on a daily basis. So it's getting used this week, but it probably won't get used next week, kind of a thing. This one, I don't have a regular time commitment to it. It's just more so as I want to do some creativity, I will use it. So it's not an everyday touch. Similar idea with this one. I could probably use it more often than I do, but I don't feel super, super compelled to get in on a regular interval and use it. It's more so just a for fun thing. And if I forced myself to get in every day or week, then it wouldn't be fun anymore. These two, on the other hand, they are at least weekly and daily. That's why I call this the everyday journal. It gets touched every day, it gets used every day. So daily task lists, weekly dashboards, all of that kind of stuff. Whereas my goal planner, I will come into it weekly to pull my ideas out of in terms of goal actions. And then once per quarter, I will do like my full kind of goal planning, goal setting in here. So these two are the ones that get used the most often. They are the most kind of like functional. The other ones are more so just like for funsies in a way. But what is the slap top? So SLAP. So it's just like laptop with an S in front of it, in the same way that I call my keyboard my tippy tappy typey, because I like to give things different names because I'm difficult like that. But all right. Need the blank pages, these fancy markers pens. Yeah, I need to do some black pages for those. That would probably be helpful. But scrolling through, do you find many use multiple planners, or do you mainly prefer using a single planner for everything, just personal preference? Kind of depends. Also depends on season of life, right? Because previously I would have my everyday planner, but then I would also have my yearly collections journal, which were both kind of for tracking functional life related stuff. Nowadays, though, I'm kind of leaning more towards doing anything task based, anything where it's like an action or something that you could check off a list would go in here. Whereas anything that would be more information based or reference based or anything like that, I'd be more inclined to put that in Notion. So that's kind of for me in terms of planning as a preference. But then when it comes to goals and project planning, I like to start in here because this is like kind of forming the thoughts, getting things organized, figuring things out. And then once they're figured out, I can move them over into here because this is where I will be taking the action. So this is kind of the like, get your head straight, get your stuff done. That's exactly kind of like the system that I like to use. For some people, they don't mind putting it in the same one, but it's more helpful for me to have them separated. So it's like a thinking space, a doing space, if that kind of makes sense. Question about the pink one, which was the Tifosi notebook. That one is there, I think, like Tree of Life. They've got a bunch of different colors. This one is notably the pink, but they also have a blue, which has the gold foiling, which is absolutely gorgeous. I did consider doing that, but I'm like, do you really need to add another blue notebook to your lineup, Jessica? We've talked about this. And especially I found that a lot of my previous R&D notebooks have been blue as well. So I'm like, let's try something a little different. Let's do a different color. But running 6 notebooks, I admire how you organize things. I appreciate that. But remember, like we said, right? Not all of them get a daily touch. Not all of them are used every single day. And I think that when people show off their lineups for notebooks online, people can default into thinking of like, oh my gosh, like how are you getting in and using that every single day, every single week, every single whatever? That's that's not what I'm doing, right? Because they do have their own individual kind of like focuses or purposes or whatnot, and I am the kind of person who is not going to beat myself up if I'm not getting in at an XYZ regular interval. 6 is fine for me. For some people, if they did 6, they would feel like they weren't being consistent enough to justify having them there, I suppose. So it's really a balancing act, right? I used to have more. I used to have we're not going to talk about it too many. She had too many. But that's the thing, right? Things change. And one of the things that has changed for me is the number of notebooks in my lineup. And in terms of the ones that I'm using on a daily basis or the ones that I would like to use on a regular basis, it's just these 2. Whereas previously I would have had other ones that I wanted to use on a more regular basis. And that got me to a point of like, okay, we need to like calm down. We need to par this list down a little bit so that then we have something a bit more manageable. Well, we need a Jest dictionary with all the current and previous fun words and sayings. I have that in one of my long-term collections journals, one of those journals that got retired, because we have quite a few. Obviously, I'm a wizard. That's definitely in there. Persnickety biscuit. That's definitely in there. Tippy tappy typey and slaptop can go in there as well. We have previous ones also. Oh, and now we're going to New Zealand for JashiiCorrin. Sounds great. I'm so excited for it. Let's do it. It'll be great. Maybe when the fuel prices for airfares go a little lower. But anywho, team. All this to say, it's all good if your journal changes, and I hope it does. And I hope that those changes are done intentionally and with these lens of curiosity and kindness for yourself, and that you have a good time with it, because that is the overall point, right? I mean, like, getting things done, sure, but also having a good time while we do it. Anywho, I will catch you guys in the next one. Thank you so much for being here as always, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day or evening or whatever else. Bye for now.